Hiranna kalja potokurshi himoto. Hirannaya tokurani kimaya takalya tata. Mohotaya vishitanya kalya motahashaka. Hirokomati haryamukode. Ishtaya mukupala karanda krusha hyarata. Hi everybody, Jai Ma. I just got back from India 5 days ago, and I'm still incorporating all of the energies that I gained from that trip. It was an amazing experience, and I had a lot of stuff come up for me. I've always had this spot in the middle of my back, right in the middle of my spine, one of my vertebrae is out, but I have all this pain on either side of my back, and it comes and goes, and I haven't felt it for a long time. But right before my trip to India, it started coming up again, and I have trouble sitting for meditation. I just get all this kind of achy pain in there. And so it was really coming up while I was in India as well. So I thought, oh my gosh, this is old. Like, this is deep and old. It's something that even when I go to a chiropractor, they can't even find it. Like, to me, it's so obvious. It's this big kink in my back, and they can't even find it. And then when they do find it, they always kind of go, oh, it's no big deal. So it's in there. It's buried pretty deep. So I was, just asking about, well, why is this coming up now? And, maybe it's time to release it. And every time I meditated on it, I got the same answer, which was, the exact phrase was, I can't see myself as divine because I am not pure. I can't see myself as divine because I am not pure. And I kept trying to clear it, and clearing it once was not working. And the Guru did a couple satsangs that were about impurity and, focusing on Krishna consciousness to be in the purity of your true divine self. So that was really something that came up very strongly for me. And I'm still feeling the aching in my back, so it's still being worked on. It's still in my consciousness. So I decided that today I would like to do a video on this subject of purity, impurity, just whatever my divine self wants to say about this, because I often use these videos for my own meditations, and if I'm having an issue, then I do a video on it, and then I'll listen to it several times to help myself with the issue as well. So I hope that these things help other people as well, because many of them are just focused on what I need to learn or what I need to hear. So, Jai Ma, I'm so happy to be back, but it was such a wonderful week. Oh my gosh, I made a vlog. It's very raw, so I don't really know if I'm going to publish it, but there may be a vlog coming out in the next couple weeks. Also, I did a beautiful interview with my friend Tim Rustow, so that will definitely be coming out probably next week. So look for that, and I love you. And I'm going to close my eyes and see what we can reveal about this subject of purity and impurity. Jai Ma. Bashto. Mayata kalyatayata. I am here. My presence is your presence. My awakeness is your awakeness. My truth is your truth. My divinity is your divinity. I am the peace, I am the joy, I am the truth, I am the consciousness. I am feeling God's grace within me, feeling me, knowing me, experiencing me, being me, so kind, so loving, so pure, so divine, right? The essence of all things is within me, as me. I am feeling me as the consciousness, as the truth, as the peace of all things. I know God's grace within me, as me. I know God's grace as the consciousness of all things. I know that I can be seen, that I can be heard, that I can be felt from this place of conscious truth, from this place of conscious understanding, and from this place of conscious peace. So I now dive into my true self, into my divine self, into my conscious self. I now dive into that place within me that is supreme. I now dive into that place within me that knows God's grace, that knows God's truth, that knows God's peace. I now dive deeply into the space within me that is the consciousness of all things we've ever known and we will ever know on this earth plane. I am so divine, I am so pure, and I am so pristine. God's grace dwells within me as the grace of all things. I am divinely guided to be, to see, to feel, to know my true divine essence in every moment of every day. The living of the life is the consciousness, is the grace, and is the truth of all things. So let's speak on this reality and how it presents itself to us each and every day. Let's speak on this reality and how it presents itself to us each and every day. Are we a real person? Are we delving into the reality of our true selves? Are we delving into the reality of our divine beings? Are we delving into the truth of the energy of the consciousness that is God's grace that rests within us as the grace of all things? My divine self, my higher self, my beingness is the consciousness that I am seeking at all times in every moment of every day. My divine self, my higher self, my conscious self is the self that I am asking for to be present with me now in this moment, to be seen, to be heard, and to be known. My essential self, my divine self, my knowingness, it is the essence of my truth. It is the essence of my peace. It is the essence of my divine understanding in grace. So I delve into myself to know myself more deeply. I delve into myself to experience myself as a divine being in consciousness and grace. I delve into myself to feel myself as the experience of grace. I now know that as I seek within me, I feel God's grace in everything around me. I now know that as I seek within me, I feel God's grace in the divinity of the truth of all things. Where am I going on this earth plane? What am I seeking? What am I feeling? And what am I knowing? How am I experiencing God's grace within me? How am I knowing the truth of all things as it comes through me, as it flows through me, as it is given to me and everything around me? I experience the grace of my being as the truth of all things. I experience the grace of my being as the consciousness, as the truth, as the knowingness. We are that. We are conscious, we are graceful, we are kind, we are loving, and we are pure. What is the purity that rests within us as God's grace? What is the purity that rests within us as God's consciousness and God's truth? What is the purity that rests within us as the consciousness, as the grace, as the truth of everything that we see, that we know, and that we experience? I am pure. I am pure in my knowingness. I am pure in my seeking. I am pure in my divine self. I am pure. I am pure in my energy of consciousness. I am pure in my energy of grace. I am pure. I am pure. I know myself as pure. I know myself as pristine. I am pure. This purity that rests within me as the consciousness, as the grace, as the truth within all things. This purity is the divine essence that I am knowing within me now. This purity is the divine essence that I am knowing within me now. Consciously arriving into this place of divine truth, into this place of divine peace, into this place of divine consciousness. We are here now in this moment of truth, peace, love, and divinity, and the consciousness within all things will awaken to us as we awaken to the consciousness within our own being. What do you want to see within your own being? What do you want to see within your own being? Do you see that God's grace is resting in you as the consciousness of all things? Do you see that God's grace is resting in you as the consciousness of all things? We accept God's grace within us as the consciousness of all things. We accept accept God's grace within us as the truth of our being. The purity of God's grace is the purity of our very own essential self. The purity of God's grace is the purity that rests within us as the consciousness that we know already. We have always been this consciousness, right? We have always seeked for this consciousness. We have always known this consciousness within our own being. But where are we going in the world? Where are we going when we seek other than our conscious truth? Where are we going when we seek other than our conscious peace? And where are we going when we seek other than that truth that is within us, that sees the divine essence of all things? We are that peace. We are that truth, and we are that divinity. So how do we see ourselves as different? How do we see ourselves as impure in this world around us? How do we see ourselves as impure in the society, right? In the conscious surroundings? How do we see ourselves as impure? Why does divinity rest within us as the consciousness of all things? Why does divinity rest within us as the purity, as the grace, as the truth that we are already? Why does consciousness rest within us as the oneness, as the peace, as the truth that we know ourselves to be already? And why have we seen ourselves as different than that purity and that grace? Why have we seen ourselves as different than the one that we came here to be? Why have we seen ourselves as different than the truth of the consciousness and the peace of our being? Why have we seen ourselves as something other than we are truly in this divinity, in this peace, in this space of truth? Now rest yourself in the consciousness of your own grace, of your own truth, and of your own peace. Rest yourself in the consciousness of the grace, of the peace, of the knowingness that you are God's grace, that you are God's divinity. The things that we see within our being are the consciousness within the truth of everything we've ever known, everything we've ever been. Rest yourself deeply within the consciousness of your own truth and know yourself as divine now. Rest yourself deeply within the consciousness of your own being and know yourself as the truth of all things now. Rest yourself deeply within the consciousness of all beings and accept yourself as the purity of God's grace. You are that purity now. There is nothing exposed. There is nothing different than who you truly are. You are the divinity, the grace, the peace, and the truth that resides within you, and that is the purity of God's grace. The purity that rests within you as the consciousness of all things is the purity that is God's grace. God's grace is resting in you now. You see that God's grace is the willingness to become and be accepted as consciousness in everything that we are doing. Purity expands itself from our being into the consciousness, into the grace, into everything that we see and experience and feel. So the purity within us that is us already expands into grace in everything around us. See that the purity is within you. There is nothing that has ever been impure in your being. There is nothing that has ever been impure in your consciousness and in your grace. There is nothing that has ever been impure in the realistic way of living in consciousness and grace. So what do you want to see? The purity within you is already exposed to the consciousness and the grace and the truth of all things. The purity within you is already the resting place of grace that you see within your very own being. Let the purity within you expand itself into the purity of God's grace in everything you are doing, seeing, accepting, knowing, and receiving. Let the purity within you expand into the grace, into the consciousness, into the truth that you are seeking in the world around you. Let the purity that is your grace, that is your truth, and that is your peace rest within you as grace. Now we seek God's grace within us only as we seek everything that we are seeing. We know God's grace within us only as everything that we are knowing. We are divine. The purity within us is the divinity. The purity within us is the consciousness. The purity within us talks to us, speaks with us, and knows us as divine. Accept yourself as pure in this moment. What is purity? What is grace? What is truth? What is knowingness? What is purity within your being right now? See it as divine. See it as truth. See it as oneness and peace. What is purity within your being now? Has anything ever called you impure? Has anything ever said to you, you are not the purity of your own true consciousness and beingness? Has anything ever said to you, I am not pure? Has anything ever said to you, I don't see you as divine, I don't see you as true, I don't see you as perfect? I know that I am the perfection of the universe, and I know that in the perfection of the universe is the purity of my own divine being. I know that in the perfection of the universe is the purity of my own divine being. There is nothing outside of us that can take that purity away from us. There is nothing outside of us that can escape from us as the purity of our own divine self. There is nothing outside of us that can take that purity from us. We are the pure divine essence of our own divine being. We are the pure divine essence of our own truth. We are the pure divine essence of that seeking within our own knowing, within our own being. We seek for that divinity within us, and I am now going to allow you to see the purity that rests within you as the purity of all things. Seek deeply within your being. Seek for the consciousness of your truth. Seek for the consciousness of yourself. Seek for the consciousness of your divinity. Now know yourself as pure. Now know yourself as pure, peaceful, divine, loving, and free. Now know yourself as pure, peaceful, divine, loving, and free. Accept that purity within your being. Accept that purity within your being. See it evolving and growing from within your being and expanding out into the consciousness, into the truth, into the grace of everything that you see. Purity is my essence, purity is my truth, purity is my beingness, purity is the consciousness and the grace and the truth that I am knowing already. I seek for nothing outside of me because only within me is the purity of my own grace. I seek for nothing outside of me because only within me is the purity that I am knowing within my own being. What could be impure within your graceful conscious self? What could be impure within the consciousness that knows you as the consciousness of all things? What could be impure within you? You are a divine being of grace. You are a divine being of consciousness. You are a divine being that has come here to be pure in everything you are doing. You are a divine being that seeks your consciousness within everything that you see. You are a divine being that knows your consciousness as the grace, as the truth, as the divinity that we see when we walk through the world with this purity within us, radiating out from us as the consciousness, as the grace, as the truth that we see. I am pure. I am divine. I am conscious. I am light. I am free. I am pure. I am divine. I am conscious. I am light. I am free. I am pure. I am divine. I am conscious. I am light. I am free. I am pure. I am divine. I am conscious. I am light. I am free. Consciously receiving this light into our beings now as we expect the grace of all things to come into us, to expand within us, and know that God's grace seeks only for peace within our being. Know that God's grace seeks only for the purity of the divine essence of all things. Know that God's grace seeks only for the purity of the divine consciousness within everything we are doing. We know God's grace as the consciousness of all things. We know God's peace as the consciousness that is the consciousness that dwells within everything. As me, I know you, you know me. We are pure, we are divine, and we are free. I know you, you know me. We are pure, we are divine, and we are free. What within you is divine essence, is divine truth, and is divine peace. What within me is divine essence, is divine truth, and is divine peace. And what in the middle of us, between us, comes between us, that could ever be anything other than divine grace, truth, peace, love, and understanding. We are purity, we are purity, we are purity, we are purity. Right now say, I am pure and I am divine. Right now say, I am pure and I am divine. Right now say, I am pure and I am divine. I accept my purity. I accept my purity and I accept my grace, because only in the non-acceptance of our purity can we see anything other than who we truly are. Only in the non-acceptance of our purity and of our grace can we be anything other than who we truly came here to be. Only in the acceptance of our purity and of our grace can we seek for something other than who we truly came here to be. We are divine, we are true, we are peaceful, we are loving, and we are free. And I say now, accept my purity, accept my grace, accept my truth. Into my divine being, know myself as I am already. Whew. Let that purity rest within you. Let that purity be seen by everyone around you. Let that purity be known by yourself and by all beings in all things at all times. Accept that purity as the divine essence of your true being. Accept that purity as the divine essence of the truth of yourself. In resting in God's grace, in speaking in God's peace, and knowing in God's face of divine understanding. Let that purity rest deeply within your being, knowing that you are the true divine essence of God's grace now. Let that purity rest deeply within your being, knowing that you are the divine essence of God's grace and God's peace now. Let that purity rest deeply within your being as the consciousness of the truth of the peace of your own divinity now. Your purity is your grace, your purity is your truth, and your purity is your peace. And you now rest in the grace of your own truth, of your own consciousness, and of your own peace. I am pure, I am divine, and I am free. I am pure, I am divine, and I am free. I am pure, I am divine, and I am free. Gracefully receiving God's grace into your being now. Gracefully receiving God's grace into your being now. Gracefully receiving God's grace into your being now. Gracefully receiving yourself as the truth of all things. Gracefully receiving yourself as the purity of the consciousness of the truth that you are already. Gracefully receiving yourself as the purity of the consciousness of the grace that you have always been and always will be. Divine understanding rests within our own space of truth, within our own being. All things are divine and all things are free, and we will be with you again in divinity, in peace, in love, in truth, in consciousness, and in grace. I love you. Divine understanding comes through me, to me, in me, and around me. I love you. Divine consciousness is the grace that we rest in every moment of every day. I love you. I give you everything that I am, and I accept you as the divine peace, as the divine truth, as the divine grace, as the divine peace, and as the purity that we are, always have been, and always will be. I am divine, I am grace, and I am peace. We are free. Meto. Mesta karambati kaliya pataya tokuruhum. Humbagrava shiva 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 karanaka. Leko patokurushaya mati. I am Gurudaraka. Nishvakarayata. Meto. Hirana